Hello and welcome. The recent elections in Manipur, Uttarakhand, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh and Goa have showed us once again with what ease we transfer power from one government to another. For this and for the high levels of voter turnout, we need to acknowledge the job done by the Election Commission. Today on the show, I've got with me the Chief Election Commissioner, Dr. S.Y. Quraishi, to share new insights on the workings of the Indian democracy and also to explain to us why perhaps he was more combative during this set of elections than ever before in his tenure. Dr. Quraishi, congratulations to you and your entire team for pulling off another set of successful elections. My first question is, this high level of voter turnout seems to be a trend that we saw start last year with the 5 state elections that you had conducted. What does this imply?
I'm surprised and I'm happy that you noticed it as a trend because lots of people thought this was something out of the ordinary. It was not a surprise for us because we were working for it. And we had set up a voter education division 2 years ago. We did scientific studies of knowledge, attitude, behavior and practice of voters through professional agencies, and on that basis we worked out lots of communication strategies. And ever since we set up this division, we have never looked back. From Bihar onwards, you are absolutely right.
That's 2010, late 2010.
That's right.
Yeah.
From then onwards, this was our 11th election. And all elections, without exception, have shown us highest ever turnout in history. Manipur was in a way an exception.
The only one that has dropped, I think, by about 6%.
Yes, that is a happy sign in the sense that there were complaints of bogus voting in Manipur in the past, and we took lots of new and stiff measures this time to make sure that bogus voting doesn't take place. So to that extent, that is a happy sign. One of the highlights of these elections in the last 2 years has been that the women have been outnumbering men in coming out to vote, despite their adverse gender ratio. That's a very happy sign.
Punjab seemed to top the list of drug seizures, liquor seizures, even the cash seizures. UP topped the list when it came to illegal arms and ammunition. Even paid news, I think again Punjab topped the list in terms of violations on these counts. What were the peculiar challenges that this set of elections threw up? Because every election seems to have the same kind of attempts to violate the model code of conduct. What would you say was peculiar to these elections?
You know, the 80% of all election is common to the country, but 20% there will be variations. And our skill is in identifying the ground realities and coming up with answers. Punjab, you are absolutely right, is the only state where we came across drug being used as a bait to the voters. So we took serious steps. We called the Director General of National Narcotics Control Bureau, had long discussion with him and his team, and then all of our security forces, our observers, expenditure observers, to keep a strict eye. And as a result, you know, the seizures of drugs in Punjab were extraordinary. 54 kilograms of heroin alone, beside 7 lakh liters of alcohol. So our identification of Punjab was a little bit of West Bengal in terms of violence, a little bit of Tamil Nadu in terms of money power, in addition the drugs.
Dr. Quraishi, let's talk about UP. The fact that it's the largest state, 403 assembly seats, 7-phase poll, you know, all the political implications, UP grabbed the national imagination. So there, Dr. Quraishi, the confrontation that you had with Salman Khurshid to begin with, and then subsequently other ministers of the Congress, do you feel in that context, if I say that the model code of conduct, which you have always defended as saying having great moral authority and therefore effective, the use of that 9% quota for Muslims in jobs within the OBC quota that the Congress leaders were going out campaigning with, is something that they did not stop till you actually had to go to write to the president, isn't it, for her intervention?
You know, the aberrations which you are referring to are at best aberrations. The model code compliance was very, very large, which is why did you see any hate speech, for instance? Have you seen any hate speech in the last 3 years? Have you seen any personal attacks among politicians? But there will be violations. For instance, somebody has taken permission for say 10 cars and using 11, or somebody has gone to do the public meeting beyond the permitted time. No, these kind of violations take place all the time. But even Salman Khurshid's violation, when he talked of reservation, we took notice of it and we issued him notice. The people think that under the model code we can hang somebody. Model code is not even a law, by the way.
It's voluntary.
It's a voluntary, but it has a force of law in the sense that Supreme Court in its judgment has said that this has to be implemented very vigorously, and an election commission has the last word. The maximum punishment that we have been giving under the model code is to censure and reprimand and issue warning, which is what we did. Right. That's all. So that took care of the first case. The second case in which we wrote to the president was different. It was not the model code violation, because model code does not say anything that you will not make any wild remarks against the election commission. It doesn't. You can criticize the election commission by all means. We don't have contempt of court power, for instance. So in this case, he was a law minister who was challenging the authority of the election commission. Instead of being upholder of a constitutional body, if he is challenging that constitutional body, that was a very unusual situation and very unfortunate situation, which is why we had to take recourse to this very the unusual remedy of writing to the president.
But could more action be taken? Because after you wrote to the president, Mr. Khurshid apologized, and then the election commission, that is you and the other election commissioners, said that all right, let's move on.
Yes. No,
could there have been any penalty of any sort?
Well, I think the very fact that the whole nation has been talking about it and has not forgiven the law minister till today, I think that is punishment enough. What more? Of course, it was for the government. Maybe they could have taken more drastic action. We didn't want to drag the issue further, because when we are conducting elections, 1,70,000 polling stations, 18 lakh our polling staff, and we have to ensure that each one delivers a zero error election. When we are, virtually we are conducting a war. In that case, to get busy and bogged down by these things is a waste of time for us. So we wanted to move on. And we thought what we did was the most dignified thing to do. More than that would have been brash. But maybe the government could have taken a slightly different view.
Dr. Quraishi, I just want to linger on this, the use of the religious card in these elections, because as an observer, that is something that we felt very strongly that we saw in these particular elections. Now, I want to tap into your understanding of the Muslim community. You have studied the community deeply, you belong to it. I want you to explain to me whether these results should be seen or analyzed as a vindication that the Muslim community is not interested in politicians who play the religious card, or politics or identity politics of the worst kind.
I would rather desist from making my own political observations because of the job I hold.
Right.
But generally I agree that the voters are now much too smart. They are not taken in by the hollow slogans, and they want something solid, they want performance, which is what is coming out repeatedly.
In the introduction, I mentioned that this was perhaps where one set of elections where we saw you in a more combative manner, appear more combative than you have in the past. Would you agree with that observation?
Well, Anuradha, on one hand you say we were too mild, and then you say we were very combative. So I don't know, maybe occasionally, because the stress of such a huge operation is not a small thing. Is our general election generally is the biggest human event of any kind in the world. So to deliver it error-free is quite a stress. So maybe in some stressful situation, I may have gone against my grain and shown a little bit of anger.
Because the description for Dr. Quraishi has been affable but effective, or effective yet affable.
I hope it hasn't changed now. No,
So I think effective continues, but has affable changed is what I'm trying to get at.
No, not really, not really. It shouldn't. I won't be happy if that is the impression I created. But there may be situations. In fact, sometimes provocation is not by the act of the defaulter and the guilty, but maybe the way the media goes on and on and on repeatedly. Sometimes my irritation could be because of that kind of.
But in fact, the media has been very positive, Dr. Quraishi, towards you and the work you've done at the Election Commission.
Yes.
And yet, on this set of elections, there are 2-3 things that came across. One, let's look at the directive to cover all the statues in UP. Now, there, Dr. Quraishi, I understand that the Model Code of Conduct says that in order to ensure a level playing field, you have to remove or cover, all political leaders and functionaries who are in the fray and serving currently. So I understand that. But in the case of the elephant statues and former Chief Minister Mayawati statues in UP, Dr. Quraishi, would you concede in hindsight that maybe the Election Commission was following the letter of the law more, or of the Model Code of Conduct, more than the spirit of the code?
No, in fact, we have no regret. We would have done the same thing. What we did was absolutely correct, legally and morally, because level playing field is our dharma. Just because these statues are bigger and spectacular.
And had a controversy in the past about them.
Yeah, that's what now. So just because they're bigger, there is no different law for bigger things. Right. Secondly, in fact, this decision was as good as taken 15 months ago. It was not a knee-jerk reaction. It was a very considered decision. 15 months ago, when the case was before the Supreme Court about so much of his expenditure on these parks and these elephants, the demand was that the symbol should be frozen. Supreme Court asked them to come to us to adjudicate on the symbol issue. At that time, we had made it very clear in our order that while we chose not to freeze the symbol, but we decided that at the time of election, no doubt we will do that.
Right.
We will ensure level playing field, and which is exactly what we did.
Right.
So to interpret it any other way, I think is not very fair and not correct.
My question really was that you were implementing the Model Code of Conduct, and I don't think anybody has a question on that count. But could it have been interpreted more in spirit and less by letter in this case, was what I was trying to get at.
There can be opinion. There are 1.2 billion people and 1.2 billion opinions. Ultimately, we have to be guided by our own wisdom and our own experience, and that was our decision. Well, obviously, there will not be unanimity on anything that we do or anybody does for that matter.
What about the charge that there was some element or some strain of bias in your behavior this time, especially, the Robert Vadra and the collector transfer incident? I also know what your explanation has been, that transfer was decided earlier before that incident. But you know how it is. Once things are said, they just stay out there in the public domain, isn't it? This charge of bias, that is something I think that has been put against you for the first time, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is unfair. In the first place, any charge of bias is very unfair, totally unfounded. Secondly, as you yourself said, you may give one instance about Robert Vadra. The fact that we had announced the transfer much before. We don't have astrology department which tells us what will be happening 6 hours later. Therefore, once you know the fact, still to the talk of bias, I think it is not fair. So we are not biased, we are not unfair. That is our strength, and which is why we carry credibility. Now, the people were saying we were very pro-Congress, but now Congress was saying that we are very anti-Congress, and the only notices which were given were to 3 of their ministers. Now, what do you make of that? Tell me.
In the previous set of elections, the DMK government, the incumbent DMK government at that time in Tamil Nadu actually said that the Election Commission has created an emergency-like situation in this state because of how strictly you were implementing the Model Code of Conduct. So it's not as if you or the Election Commission hasn't been in a confrontational or combative role in the discharge of your duties. And yet this time round, the criticisms have been of a different nature. So I'm trying to find out what changed.
No, I don't know, because maybe the profile of the election itself, UP, is a very, very sensitive and volatile election. Tamil Nadu was one day. The fact that they accused us of imposing emergency, in fact, they had used the word there is a bias against Tamil Nadu. They talked of bias there also. I have very often said that, that's my experience, that ruling party hates us and opposition parties love us. Why? Because we do not allow any incumbency advantage, because they have access to all the power, the officers, and whom they plant here and there. That is something we neutralize. So, which is what they cannot stand. And when the same the ruling party becomes an opposition party, then they look up to us for a fair deal. So we are fair, even-handed at all times. Let there be no doubt about that.
You became a part of the Election Commission in 2006 and you became the Chief Election Commissioner in 2010. Now, this year, a few months from now, you will have to retire from this office. You will be 65 years old. What happens next when you have been, you've had a long service as an IAS officer, now you're a constitutional authority. What happens next?
Well, I think 60 years of active service is long enough. I joined service in 69. I was teaching for 2 years, then 71 I joined the IAS. For about 40 years of service is long enough. I've long neglected my own personal matters also, my family. I would spend time reading, writing, playing music, enjoying music.
And you're one person who I know has a lot of other interests, isn't it? Like you mentioned, music and writing.
Yes, exactly.
But Dr. Quraishi, would you be open to the idea of if your name was to be put forward as a presidential candidate for India?
I think it's a very embarrassing suggestion and very unfair to expect any answer from me on this. So I'm too small a man.
Are you disappointed that those electoral reforms that you and a lot of people have suggested that we need very urgently have not made it to the front burner of this government?
Well, they had promised to me that they will bring it in the winter session, the current law minister.
Right.
The fact that the union law minister came to election commission not once, twice, but 3 times, twice Mr. Moily, then Mr. Khurshid, to talk of electoral reforms showed their seriousness and eagerness to do something. In his last visit, Mr. Salman Khurshid had mentioned that he will bring it up in the winter session. It did not happen. But at the same time, we would like to be fair, because we saw that the parliament was kept entirely busy by Lokpal. All the time it was Lokpal and nothing else. So maybe that was a good enough reason. But
it's not even on the list of the budget session now.
If that is the case, that is very disappointing, and I'll be very disappointed if electoral reforms do not see the light of the day. It's a package of reforms, more than 20 reforms. Maybe 1 or 2 are contentious, but what stops the government from bringing up the reforms about which there is no debate, no controversy? So it will not be very wise of the government. Of course, the government is wiser than anybody else. So not to bring it up, because people are also losing patience. They should see the writing on the wall. I have often said that the election is the biggest source of corruption. And not just me, many people say this. Because if you spend crores at the time of election, the moment you are elected, the first thing you do is call your officers and say, I invested 10 crores, I want my return, so let us now start making money. That is how it begins. So how to stop it? People are not going to tolerate corruption anymore. That's something I think we should all understand.
When you look back at the time you've spent at the Election Commission, what would you say is the thing that has made you the proudest of the time you've managed to spend here?
There were 2 challenges I had before me. One, money power, the other, voter apathy. I set up 2 divisions, and I think we have demonstrated that both these strategies worked phenomenally. I've met many politicians in the last few days who mentioned and who appreciated that there was real check on money power this time. Of course, I am not saying that the money in there totally disappeared, because there is no magic wand with anybody. Black money cannot be wished away in the 30 days. Some parties, some candidates came up with more ingenious ways, but why ingenious? They are time-tested hawala type of transaction. Now they are very, very difficult to catch. But we were able to put some fear of God in the minds of the candidates. The money movement had stopped drastically, and the expenditure on election came down substantially. That is one area where I feel that we were successful, and voter education and involving voters in turnout. Now 11 elections, one after the other, highest ever turnout in history, is not a joke. And I think all credit and salute to the voters who responded so positively, their maturity, the way they vote now. Ask any politician, they will tell you the smartest voter in the world is the Indian voter.
Dr. Quraishi, I think a lot of people will agree that you, when in a few months' time, when you leave this office, you will have left it stronger. So I wish you all the best with all the various activities that you plan to keep yourself busy. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Anuradha.